What's up everyone, welcome to another video. In this video, I will convert the plate-loaded lat pulley system on the Fitness Reality 810 XLT Supermax Power Cage to a weight stack with a selector pin. So here is the lat pull-down attachment, which I have done a review video on and highly recommend it. It was an absolute game changer for the home gym. But weight plates have to be added to the slider, which is typical. But this can be time consuming and make small adjustments cumbersome, and can make supersets nearly impossible. So I decided to convert it to a weight stack with a selector pin. Initially I planned to build my own. I was going to build a simple frame out of square tube, add 2 linear bearing shafts, and add a weight stack. But weight stacks were expensive and only went up to 200 pounds, which is not enough because I'm an animal. So I looked on Facebook Marketplace for a weight machine with a donor weight stack that I could use. I could get a whole machine for less than the cost of just the new weight stack. Then I found this gem. It's some old school dungeon gym lat pull down machine and uses chain and sprockets instead of pulleys and cable. But I got it for this, a 300 pound weight stack with the linear bearing shafts. Just move the pin to select the desired weight. But it does have some issues. The bottom plate is broken and there's a plate missing. I figured I could get a replacement, but I was wrong. And for the linear bearings, it has brass bushings. As a mechanical engineer, this is the worst possible design choice for this application. They are held in place with set screws. This one was stripped out, but luckily the easy out worked this time, which doesn't seem to happen often. This thing is going to take some work, and rebuilding a machine is not what I had in mind. I wanted a nice weight stack that works, so I could just integrate it in. But here we are, and I'm going to move forward. Plus it pretty much already had the tube frame that I planned to build from scratch. I just need to cut off this and cut off that. And there's my frame. And it does function. I did a couple workouts with it in the garage, and I'm looking forward to the final integration results. First up, the range of motion on the Fitness Reality system is 51¼ inches. And the range of motion on the weight stack is 51½ inches. So they're about the same. We don't need to make the frame taller or shorter. Now let's tear it down to the frame so we can modify it. The linear bearing shafts are attached up here, with 1 bolt at the top of each shaft. First, let's remove the chain by removing the connecting link. Goodbye, greasy chain. Now let's disconnect the linear bearing shafts by removing the nuts and pulling out the retaining bolts. Then I could tilt the whole stack over to the side and slide the plates off from the top. And we are left with just the frame. Now we can modify it. And here it is. We're going to cut this off, and add a foot pad under here. So let's get started. Cutting, 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 and goodbye sprockets. And on the other end, cutting, cutting, cutting. I would like to point out that I'm wearing shorts and sandals. This is not recommended, and it was not planned. I just went outside with a tape measure to check the vertical motion range, and it snowballed into frame modification before I realized what happened. And here we are, the lat pull-down seat is gone. Next, I can't have all of these rough cuts all over the frame. That's dangerous. I cleaned everything up with the flapper wheel. And yes, I'm wearing pants and shoes now. And everything is looking nice and smooth. Mission complete. Next up, I ordered a couple of cable pulleys to route the cable to the weight stack. I will not be hanging them from the included lifting eye bolts, so I removed them. The pulleys will be mounted up here on top of the frame to route the cable from the weight stack to the cage. But I am going to reuse the mounting holes in the pulley brackets to bolt them to the frame. Initially, I was going to weld them to the frame, but bolting them gives more flexibility if anything needs to be moved or changed. Also, the frame is tall. I was already considering cutting it in half to get it down into the basement where my home gym is. I did some measuring, and fortunately, I can maneuver it down as is. But with the pulleys on top, it will be too tall. So bolting them on will work great. I need the end of the top tube open to access the pulley mounting nut, but I'm going to cap off the bottom tube and add a foot pad. So here we go. I used some of the scrap from the sprocket area to cut out a cap for the end of the tube, then cleaned it up and welded it on. This is not just for looks or hygienics, so rats don't live inside of it. This is a structural necessity. Without the cap, the tube can cave in. Then I had to pack it up for the day. It was dark out, and I could barely see what I was doing. Bright and early on the next day, I cleaned up the weld with the good old flapper wheel. Then it was time to add a foot pad, right here. Once again, I robbed some material from the sprocket scrap area. It's 1/4-inch plate, which matches the thickness of the other pads. Then I added the corner radiuses and cleaned it up, and welded it to the frame. Let's go back to the top tube. During use, with the pulley on top, and up to 300 pounds of force dynamically loaded. Technically, the tube could potentially bow over time. I can't leave it like this. I'm going to add a stiffener. I'm not going to bore you with all of the cutting and welding, so here it is. It will prevent bowing and also allow access to the pulley nut. One more area of potential repair is down here. The tube is caved in where the weight stack is supported. I considered adding a flat plate with 2 clearance holes drilled in it for the shafts, but the previous owner had these big thick washers, which functionally solved the problem, and I'm not trying to rebuild the whole machine, so I'm going to stick with the washers. Next, I hit the whole frame with some sandpaper to prepare the surface for paint. Then wipe the whole thing down with acetone to get rid of any contaminants on the surface. Then painted it. It was pretty windy outside, so I used a sheet of OSB as a shield to block the wind. It took a lot of strength and skill to hold that sheet. It was like a sail for the wind, but my strength is impressive and it got the job done. Next is the weight plates. I can't have these rusty old plates in this nice shiny frame, but I couldn't think of a good color to paint them. Black plates in a black frame would be boring, and colors like red or something would be weird. But then it hit me. Chrome was the answer. Chrome plates would look pretty cool. And since the bottom plate was cracked in half, I made this for the bottom of the stack to give the bottom plate some more support. I also cleaned up the linear bearing shafts because they were pretty filthy with solidified grease. Now let's circle back to the top plate with the linear bearings. The brass bushings are all worn out. I definitely want to replace these. And currently the connector is designed to attach roller chain. First, let's get the brass bushings out of the top plate. This hole dimpled into the bushing is for the set screw to seat into and hold it in place. But look at all these score marks on the side of the bushing. Someone used a punch and put a bunch of dimples inside of the bore to help the bushing stay in place. And let's remove the roller chain connector. We don't need this anymore. So, I got some ceramic linear bearings. They last a lot longer and can run dry with no lubrication. They are light years better than the brass bushings. I also got a T-handle quick release pin for the selector pin. I think I will prefer it over the bent steel rod that came with the machine. And I got a lifting eye bolt to replace the roller chain connector. It's big and the load capacity is way overrated, but I'm stuck with matching the 1/2-inch 13 threads on the top plate. So here's the ceramic linear bearing. It's a nice fit and slides really nice. The dimples in the top plate prevent them from being installed. And as I spent hours carefully filing them down, I imagined the person who spent 2 minutes putting them all in, thinking it was a great idea. But I eventually got them all filed down. So let's install some linear bearings. First I installed the retaining ring on one end. Then installed it into the bore and tapped it all the way in. And here it is fully seated on this side. And this side has a little gap between the surface and the retaining ring. But I planned ahead and measured the stack up, and have appropriate thickness shim washers. Then I installed the other retaining ring to secure it. And here we are, the new linear bearing is installed. And last I installed the new lifting eye bolt, so it can be connected to a cable. And disappointing news, I had to reinstall the original bushings. The bores in the top plate are not parallel, and the new bearings were binding up. This arrangement was not precision machined, and these bushings only worked in the exact original locations and orientations. Otherwise it bound up. This is something I will address sometime later. But for now it goes up and down, so it's usable. And now it's time for the main event that we've all been waiting for. This is complete, and it's time to transport everything into the Rise of Iron gym. And here we are in the gym. We have the frame, the weight plates and hardware, the linear shafts and top plate. We have everything, and it's all going right here. First, I got the frame set in place. And here it is. It sticks out a bit and takes up some room. I considered modifying the cage to get the weight stack frame closer, but in the end, decided not to modify the cage and keep it original, because I'll probably sell it at some point. Then I secured the weight stack to the cage. These boards and clamps are just temporary to get things lined up. I did not pre-design attachment brackets because I wanted to wait until they were actually together and measure exactly what's needed. And next, I installed the pulleys on top of the frame, making sure they were in line with each other. And here they are. This cable will be disconnected from the weight plate slider, and will be rerouted over the pulleys and down to the weight stack. So let's install the weight stack. I put down the monster washers, the compression springs, and the first couple plates, then set the shafts in place and installed each plate individually. And with the weight stack installed, now we're getting somewhere. Now it's just time to reroute the cable. So I routed it, and it was easy, nothing special to report. With the cable rerouted, it is too short and does not reach the weight stack, but I can cheat it by adding more chain down here, which will shift everything and the cable will reach. So here's the extra chain added. This pair of pulleys is typically down here, but they shifted up, and the cable reaches. This carabiner is temporary for testing, and will get replaced. When I designed this on paper, one pulley was a possibility, like this. But I wasn't sure if the cable would touch the frame. I knew it would be close, so I played it safe and added a pulley here. With everything in place, I also added a shim under the back foot pads to get the frame plumb and parallel with the Fitness Reality cage. And last, before testing, something needs to be added here between the two uprights. When pulling on the weight, the frame will want to tip towards the cage, so something needs to be here to stop that. And a precision cut 4x4 and a zip tie will do the job. And finally, it's time to test it. Everything works great. It's secure, and I'm really going to like this new setup. I just moved the selector pin and I'm ready to lift. No more carrying plates around like a chump. To finish this up, I just need a longer cable and brackets. I had these laser cut, but they came in a little rough. I need to re-drill all these holes, clean them up, blah blah blah. Bam! Here they are. And I waited for days, but you only have to wait seconds. Bam! Here's the new cable. First, let's install the shiny new cable. Over this pulley, under that pulley, over, and down to the weight stack. And a shackle to connect the cable to the top plate, with 3 washers on each side to center the cable in the shackle. And last, remove the extra length of chain and restore it to the original configuration. Then, let's remove the temporary wood and clamps and install the new brackets. The brackets sandwich the posts to keep the sides aligned, and the mounting bolts that straddle the posts are tight tolerance and capture the front and the back of the posts, so the posts are locked into position on all 4 sides. I considered rubber sheets and sleeves for the bolts to protect the contact surfaces, but it's easy to go into rabbit holes with over-engineering. I'm personally not worried about a couple scratches, and this will do the job. And 2 quick last things. I added number decals showing the weight at each pin location. This seemed like it would be a simple task, but surprisingly, it took hours. However, it turned out nice, and it was definitely worth it. And last, I added a rubber washer to the selector pin so the plastic handle won't beat up the paint on the plates when the pin is inserted. Hopefully this will help the paint last longer. And that's it! The weight stack conversion is complete and ready to use! I love the new functionality, and I'm happy with it. It makes workouts more efficient and enjoyable. Was it worth it? Practically, it took a lot of time and effort. And the total cost stacked up with the cable, pulleys, bracket, paint, hardware, and that stuff. From that standpoint, it probably made more sense to sell my cage and buy something different with a weight stack. But for me, it was worth it. I work as a mechanical engineer, and I enjoy designing things and building things. I had a vision, and I made it a reality. There are definitely different ways to do it, but this is how I did it, and I'm happy with the results. I do see myself replacing this setup in the future. There are some pretty nice machines out there, but for now, I'm still enjoying my 810 XLT Supermax Power Cage with a weight stack. So, that wraps this up. I hope you found it helpful or entertaining. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next video.